Auzubillahi Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear participants, I welcome you to my course, The Development of Social Thought and Classical Theory. Today, the topic of my discussion is Voltaire. He was a French philosopher, critic, humorist, historian, a man of many qualities. He was born in 1694 in Paris, and he again died in France in 1778. He was educated at the Jesuit school in Paris, and later on went on to become a prolific writer and a political and social philosopher. The most important thing about Voltaire is that he is a man who was deeply influenced by the ideas of Sir Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton, was a landmark in the Western history of scientific and philosophical thought, because he was the man who gave those laws of physics due to which the natural order was explained and understood. So Voltaire was deeply influenced by him, and he said that if we can understand the natural order by applying the Newtonian laws of classical mechanics, why not understand the society and the culture? So he said that we can also understand the social order by understanding and discovering the social and the cultural laws governing the social world. So this was his inspiration from Sir Isaac Newton. He was also influenced by the ideas of John Locke, and John Locke, again was a very influential person, English philosopher, political philosopher, and a thinker who, tried to understand the organization of the society and the laws governing it. I will, mainly focus on his philosophical, religious ideas, and then his political and social ideas. These four, are two areas I'm going to touch upon. He was a man who was deeply influenced by the age of reason. 18th century in which he was born was the age is known as, in the cultural history of the West, as the age of enlightenment or the age of reason. It was the time when there was a great rebellion against the dogmatic domination and control of the Roman Catholic Church. There was an open rebellion. Similarly, on the political ground, in the political realm, there was great rebellion and revolutionary spirit unleashed by different thinkers, including Voltaire, although he was very skeptical about the democracy and its practices, and remained critical throughout his life. He claimed that only an enlightened monarch, a monarch who is enlightened, a king who is enlightened, can develop and progress and uplift and empower his subjects, not the democracy. But somehow his ideas, they also influenced the American Revolution, and the rationalism which he preached and which he practiced throughout his life and in his writings, is eminently manifested in the writing of the Bill of Rights in the United States of America. So people like Benjamin Franklin, people like Alexander Hamilton, and other authors of the American Constitution, Declaration of Independence, were deeply influenced by the philosophical and the rational ideas of Voltaire, Jean Voltaire. It is very important to understand the relationship of his philosophical and religious ideas to his political and social ideas. On the philosophical and the religious planes, he believed that this world is created by a God, which is this concept is called the concept of Deism. Deism means that there is a God, that this universe, that this human world has been created by a God, but a God who is rational in his behavior, and a God who has created perfect laws which underlie the functioning and the behavior of this universe and of the human society and civilization. Once the God, that supernatural being who has created this universe, has done his job, completed his task, he is now sitting and observing it. He is no more interested that how the human beings now manage it. He is a rational God, and he is given the gift of reason to the human beings. Now it is up to the human beings that how they manage and organize their own lives, their social lives, their moral lives, and how and by which mean they discover those universal laws which govern the behavior of the heavenly bodies or the cosmological and the natural phenomena. So there is his concept of God is quite influenced by the ideas of Sir Isaac Newton, who was a deist, and other English philosophers, because deism became very popular in the during the Enlightenment and before Enlightenment, during the 17th and the 18th century. That God is a rational and a thoughtful being who has created a natural and a social system which is based on reason, which is based on intellect, which is based on objectivity, and which obeys laws and rules governing their behavior. So that is his concept of deism. A God who has created a perfect system, but he who is no more interfering into that system is running and functioning on the basis of absolute laws given by that God. You see, there is a very famous this English verse by an English poet, Alexander Pope. I'm mixing up the name. I don't know, Alexander Pope or someone who has written that before Newton it was all darkness, and God said light, and God said Newton, and it was light everywhere. Before Newton it was all darkness, and God said Newton, and it was light everywhere. So Newton had such an important impact on the lives of the West European civilization and West European culture, that it went on to influence. And when we will go further, and when we will study the thought of Auguste Comte, Karl Marx, and other social thinkers of West Europe, Herbert Spencer, we will find a clear influence, clear cut and dominant influence of Sir Isaac Newton, and we will find a clear cut and dominant influence of Charles Darwin, because these were the people who tried to explain, the one tried to explain the behavior of the nature, and the Darwin tried to explain and interpret the behavior of the living things of life. So they, both of them, became very important. The one presented the idea of the laws of mechanics, laws of physics, universal laws of physics, his famous laws, 3 laws of motion, and Charles Darwin presented the theory of evolution by means of natural selection, and the subtitle of his book is An Inquiry into the Variation of Species, how different species in the world has evolved and developed and progressed, including the human beings. So these two ideas, they also deeply influenced the social thought of Auguste Comte, the social thought of Karl Marx, the social thought of Herbert Spencer. In one way or the other, they tried to uncover and understand the general laws governing the social world, social phenomena, just like the natural phenomena, and They try to understand the reasons and the causes behind the emergence of social and historical phenomena, and they try to understand the social and historical phenomena from an evolutionary perspective, from the perspective of evolution, that human social systems have also evolved from the simpler to the more complex. From the human evolution started after the Neanderthal, after the last ice age, when the human beings, the Neanderthals disappeared and the Homo sapiens, our ancestors, appeared on earth around 10,000 years BC. So what they did, it was in the beginning, they were just hunting the animals and surviving through hunting. The hunting and gathering was the beginning. That was the elementary form of human social system. Rehan, you are getting my point? Yes. Hunting and gathering was the beginning of the human social system. Then it went on to progress and evolve into horticultural system. Then it went on to evolve and progress into pastoral society. From pastoral to the nomadic society. From nomadic to the further next to the agricultural level. From the agricultural society, it evolved and progressed into the industrial society. From the industrial society, it went on to develop into post-industrial, post-modern, post-service oriented society, in which right now you are living, which is the most and this is a society which is technologically, informationally driven. This is a society and this is a civilization in which right now you are living. It is a society created by information, sustained by information, driven by information, modified and transformed by information. Not only the personal identities, not only the cultural identities, but also the natural and the cosmological concepts are also being transformed, and the rapid growth of knowledge by the informational developments. So, his deism, he believed in deism, in a deity who has created a perfect system and who is now no more interested and no more interfering into its working. It is now up to the human beings that they use their reason and intellect and organize their lives on the basis of that. Then comes his political ideas. In politics, he left no one spared. He spared no one from his criticism. You should remember one thing: he was a humorist of a highest quality, and he wrote a book, Candide, as a very famous. It is a sort of a novel, but a novel in which he has caricatured different characters of the European society, of the French society, and other people, and he has exposed the hypocrisies and the idiosyncrasies of different characters. So he has vehemently and very radically criticized, for example, the clergy, the Western clergy, the Pope. He criticized the French king and the French emperor, French royalty. He criticized the bourgeois, the middle class. He said that the bourgeois, they don't use their reason. They are ineffective in the French society. He criticized the corruption and exploitation of the French empire, French king, and the royalty surrounding him. He said they are naive. They do not understand and realize the problems of the common people. Then as it comes to the commoners, he said that they are superstitious. Common people, ordinary people, although they are suffering, but they don't realize it, and they are ignorant. Their lack of education and their lack of knowledge drives them to submit to the subjugation and to the serfdom of the corrupt elite and the corrupt French royalty. Similarly, he made fun of the church, Roman Catholic Church, and the Pope and the clergies. And there is a and due to these critical activities of Voltaire, at least 3 times he was exiled from France. 3 times. First time he was exiled from Paris for 2 years, and he made fun of one important royal. His name was probably Count Orleans, and he made fun of him, and he was forced out of into exile from Paris, and he lived in the suburbs of some southern city of France. Then second time, his criticism became more violent about the political and religious hypocrisies of the French society. So he was exiled to, he left France and he went to United Kingdom, to Britain, to London. He lived there, and it was there during his stay in London he came under the influence of Isaac Newton and the ideas of John Locke. Lastly, he was exiled to Switzerland before he came back as a hero, and he received a hero's reception in Paris in 1778, well before, 10 years before the French Revolution. But he laid the foundations of a big revolution, you see. So his criticism, his philosophical criticism and his critique of the religious hypocrisies and bigotry, you know, led to a new realization within the European soul. From Deism, he moved on to the next step, and he said that if we want to create a harmonious, a balanced and a happy society, so we need to create tolerance. And he wrote a book on tolerance. He wrote a treatise on knowledge. The title of the book is A Treatise on Tolerance. And in that treatise, he propagates the concept of tolerance. He says that all religions, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam and other religions, they should live together, they should tolerate each other, they should accept each other. If we want to live in a peaceful and in a cooperative manner, and if we want to build a peaceful and cooperative human society. Somewhere in his Candide, he has also ridiculed the Ottoman, Sultan, Ottoman Empire, the ruler of the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Sultan. He has caricatured him. I don't recall that, what was that, but he has said that he is the master of the Turkish nation, something like this. The Ottoman Sultan, he is all powerful, he is absolute, he is the mighty ruler of the Turks, and all the Turks are his slave. And I have read it somewhere in some history book that due to that comment, he was greatly criticized and disliked by the Turkish people. I think his depiction of the Turkish society and Turkish government was partly based on his, I would say, insufficient information, because in those times monarchies and the hereditary rule of rulership and government was accepted throughout the world, not only in the East. Mostly the Western writers, they portray that the Eastern societies are monarchic, they are dynastic, and when the father dies, his son becomes king, and when the son dies, his grandson becomes the king or the ruler or the sultan or the emperor. This was also the accepted rule within the French Empire, within the British Empire, with the Belgian Empire, within other European kingdoms and states, because during the 18th and the 19th century, even in the 17th century, throughout the world, you can say the epoch, the entire historical epoch of that time was characterized by kingdoms and empires and by a governance structure based on hereditary kinship. You see? So as he says somewhere in his writings, he says that I am a man of action. Voltaire, he says that I am a man of action. Contrary to Rousseau, he said that Rousseau is a man of words. He is a philosopher, but I am a man of action, and I believe in changing and transforming and uplifting the conditions, social conditions and the political conditions of the masses and the ordinary people. So, on the religious and philosophical, two ideas are important. Deism, the use and the firm belief in reason, rationality, and the rational order prevalent in the not only in the natural world but in the social and historical world also. And then the concept of tolerance. Now we come to his concepts about society and his concepts about politics. He criticized the corrupt French Empire. He criticized the lavish lifestyle of the French emperor and the French royalty. But he believed that democracy is no solution. He openly criticized democracy, and he said that democracy cannot deliver and cannot ameliorate the lot of the common people and the common masses. This was his key, you can say, this was the punchline of his political philosophy. What he believed, that an enlightened monarch, a well-read monarch, a king or an emperor, an absolute ruler who uses his intellect, who uses his reason to guide not only his own life but control and govern his subjects and his empire, can deliver and can help in the progress of human society. So this is strange that on the one hand you can find here a contradiction in his thought. On the one hand, he believes in the rationality and the freedom born out of that rationality of human beings, the use of reason and intellect by the human beings, and the freedom and the responsibility born out of that rationality and that intellect. But on the other hand, he is skeptical about that, because what is democracy? In democracy, you trust and you give authority to the masses. You trust on their judgment. You allow them. You believe in the will of in the general will, in the way what Rousseau says, the general will, the will of the people, and you decide the government, the system of government on the basis of the will of the people. That they are the best people to decide how to live, how to organize their life, and how to go about into their political and social affairs. On the one hand, he says that man can build a rational system, rational society. On the other hand, he is skeptical about the democracy and the democratic values. And he was also skeptical about the fruits and the outcomes of the American Revolution, though the history has shown it otherwise. The American state, which was founded on the principles of atheism, on principles of secularism, on the principle of materialism, on the principle of equality, liberty and fraternity, the principles which were later on adopted by the French Revolution also, a society based on the right of the freedom and right of the individual. American state was created out of this, and it was the typical manifestation of the separation of state and church, because in the Europe there was a great struggle since Reformation of Martin Luther. Martin Luther said that state should not intervene and interfere into the matters of religion. State is a different thing, religion is a different thing. In the American Revolution, we see the realization of that concept and that idea, that the American founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, and all these guys, Alexander Hamilton, all these people who wrote the Bill of Rights, they separated the religion, and rather they said that a tolerant society, they created a tolerant society in which people of all religion, what was considered as most important was the work of the individual, how a person works. He is totally free, he or she is totally free to do and to achieve. There was a fair competition, and through fair competition and through fair assessment and testing, you can achieve anything within the American state and American state. So that those principles and those spirits of the age of reason were incorporated into the Bill of Rights, into the American Constitution. On the political level, he criticized the corruption of the elite and the royalty and the kings, and he he argued that an enlightened monarch on the social scale, he said that freedom and liberty of the ordinary masses of the people can only be achieved through education, and that education and enlightenment can be achieved, can be given to the people by an enlightened monarch, and by the use of reason, by the use of rational and intellectual inquiry. So these are different levels: the philosophical and religious levels, the political level, the social level, and then he has also written books on history. He has also written literary and fictional works and poetry. He was also a poet. He has also written books of poetry. He was a multi-dimensional, you can say, person. And according to one source, there is a foundation in the University of Oxford which is known as the Voltaire Foundation, and they have compiled his entire writings and intellectual work, and it consists of 200 volumes, 200 books consisting of his literary, his philosophical, his religious, political and other contributions. 200 volumes have been compiled and published by the Voltaire. It was established in 1976, and it since has been publishing and popularizing his work. According to one critic, the age of reason, the age of enlightenment was nothing but the age of Voltaire. Voltaire was the overarching, the grand person of the Enlightenment. There are other people, but he, was a man who operationalized the ideas of Enlightenment, particularly the idea of reason, the idea of freedom, the idea of tolerance, the idea of equality. He operationalized these ideas through his writing, through his humorous wit, and was even condemned and forsaken by his people and by his society, but he never stopped, continued his struggle, and he has rightly been commented and commended that the age of enlightenment was nothing but the age of Voltaire. Thank you very much. That's all for today. If you have any questions,